everyone. I'm really honored to be speaking to all of you today at the product conference. I assume maybe some of you are in this room because there is no seat left in the other room, but that's fine. Been there, done that. So before we move on to our beautiful topic about feedback and how powerful it can be in your product discovery, just wanted to give you a quick word about myself and EPSAR. So I'm Marion. I joined EPSAR 3 years ago to lead the product and design team. And before that, I spent about 10 years in a large bank at various positions. And EPSAR is a B2B2C company that maybe some of you may know, which empowers employees to save for the future. So what we basically do is we provide HR teams with a web and mobile application for their employees to invest company bonuses and pensions. So maybe some of you French people might have heard words like intéressement, participation, PE, PERCO. These are very weird names. Usually nobody understands what it is. And that's why EPSAR exists, is because we think employees deserve better. We think they deserve to fully grasp the value of these company perks. We think they should be able to save efficiently for their projects and also be able to determine where their money should and should not be invested. And to do this, we have this simple and guided application with financial advice, with full transparency on where your money goes, and also with a growing selection of sustainable investments. So when I joined EPSAR 3 years ago, I found a product which, like most products, had been designed by 2 founders, a couple of engineers, and no user. So there was no feedback collection process at all. And so the first thing that we did at the product team was that we chose an in-app survey tool. And we started asking users just basic questions like, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend? Did you like this feature? Why not? Blah, blah, blah. And at first, we were super excited because we were getting tons of feedback. We were learning a lot. And so, well, basically, we were very happy about it. But after some time, I'd say maybe after 6 months or 1 year, we found that we weren't learning that much anymore because we were getting redundant feedback. Users were pretty much telling us the same all the time. Also, feedback were not really specific and thus not very actionable. And actually, some of our users got really annoyed by us asking questions. So we needed to reduce the pressure with surveys. And eventually, I found that people in the team didn't read the feedbacks anymore, and they weren't using them. And we mainly relied on traditional things like user interviews, tests, reading chats with the CSM teams, which are all great methods, and we're still doing a lot of that today. But it's time-consuming, it's costly, and also it lacks sometimes the quantitative perspective that you want to have in your qualitative insights. And so what we did at that point was we asked ourselves, how can we make faster and better discovery by leveraging on our feedback tool? So the first thing that we did at that point, that was a year ago, we changed our feedback survey, or survey tool, to choose an alternative solution, which is called Scrib. These guys are there. They have a stand over there if you want to meet them later. The reason why we chose Scrib is, first of all, their respondent experience is nice, and we find that we reach much higher response rates with that experience. And the other reason is that for product teams like ours, like us, the interface is very flexible, very simple to use, to configure lots of different surveys and analyze the results in minutes. So I'm going to take you through 4 concrete use cases, which are examples of how we use the feedback collection at various moments of our product development cycle. The first one will be around the early insights and how you can gain some of them at minimal cost, which helps you make maybe better roadmap choices. The other one is as you move on to defining a hypothesis, how you can use the feedback tool to validate your hypothesis very fast. And then as you move on to solution exploration, how you can make user tests faster by recruiting users through the tool. And finally, as you launch your feature, the way you can measure success with the feedback tool and get additional insights to iterate faster. So one of the problems that we have at EPSAR was that we need to sometimes collect early insight on a problem to start understanding the problem without investing too much on it. And we need to do this to make the best roadmap choices. So it's like the really early discovery that you need to do. And I'm going to give you one example. So we have this thing that when a company which was previously using another solution chooses EPSR and becomes a client, we onboard all of their employees to our product, and then we transfer all the money that our users, from our users on their previous account to their new EPSR account. And as we do this, we have a legal obligation, which is a bit stupid, to invest their money on default investments. And so what it means is that the money of our users is not invested in consideration of what their savings plan are. It may be not adapted to what they want to do with the money later. So to solve this issue, originally in our product, we developed a feature which helped users getting some advice. So we basically were suggesting them alternative investments that were best suited for them. So for us, product team, this feature was super valuable. But when we looked at the usage, only 10% of our users were actually using it. So we were wondering why. We looked at tracking data, but it didn't help. And we wondered, why is it that they don't convert? Is it because they don't know their money was transferred and invested by default? Is it that they don't see the feature? Or maybe they've seen the feature, but they don't understand it, or they don't see what's in it for them? Multiple hypotheses. And at this stage, we could have done things like interviews or shadowing, but this takes time, as you know, and you get insights from maybe 5, 10 users. So in terms of bias and reliability, it's not perfect. And also, in our case, it's like, why would you want to spend some time on a problem which users don't tell you about, which was the case in that specific case, we had no insights from users about that. Whereas we had tons of problems which users tell us about. So we just needed to invest just a minimum time to get early insights. And to do this, we just configured these simple surveys that when users, so it was targeted at users who had just received the money from their previous accounts, and we asked them just specific questions regarding the knowledge that they had that their money was transferred and why, what they were going to do with the money, and why, blah, blah. And very fastly, I think it was about 1 or 2 weeks, we got more than 1,000 answers with a beautiful response rates. And we learned tons of things. Like we learned that our users knew their money was transferred and invested by default, but they declared that they actually were happy about it, kind of. They wanted to leave it as it is for various reasons. Either they felt they lacked the knowledge to make changes, or they didn't have the time, or it could be also that they didn't want to invest on riskier investments. So that helped us realize that moving on, increasing the conversion rate of our feature would be kind of costly in terms of discovery and solution exploration. And for us, it's something that the type of information we want to take into account as we make roadmap decisions. Now, moving on to the next step. So once you define your hypothesis, you want to test them. Here is an example of the way we tested some hypotheses through with this feedback tool. Sorry. So we have the product that we have was originally designed in a way that users could only be advised once, and this happened at onboarding. So basically, as they created their accounts, we offered them to ask them a few questions and get a personalized recommendation of an investor profile in return. And so originally, this wasn't an issue because our users were pretty new to EPSR. People don't change savings plan every week. But after some time, we wondered that we felt maybe some of our users would like to get fresh recommendation. But here again, we had almost no insight from users. No one was talking about it to the CSM teams. No one was telling us, asking us for this feature in in our surveys. So we thought and on the other hand, that we knew that this feature would be kind of costly to build because it would need heavy refactoring. So what we did was we decided to run 2 experiments, and I'm going to show you after what it means. And these experiments aimed at testing our main assumption, which was that as users are asked to make a choice of investments for their company bonus, which generally happens once a year, that's a moment when they would like, probably, they would see the value in being re-advised. And so to do this, as I said, we run a first experiment, which was a survey. Just a quick word on how we build experiments. We use this framework, a canvas, from a book called Testing Business Ideas. Maybe some of you may know about it. It's a great book. And it allows us to think in advance of the metrics that we want to measure and the levels that we are looking to reach to validate our hypothesis. And I think it's a great way to reduce your confirmation bias as a PM, because basically it helps you decide in advance of what it is, in which cases your hypothesis will be considered as validated. So as I said, first experiment, simple survey. We asked just those users who were about to receive a bonus from their company and make a choice if they would be interested to receive a new recommendation from EPSA. And again, we received very fast results confirming that there was an interest, or at least a declared interest. But because, as I said, this feature was high risk and this is just a survey, we thought, considering this specific case, we wanted to have more confidence, and therefore we ran a second experiment, which was an MVP. And as we do an MVP, the way we use the feedback tool is like an entrance door, let's say, to an external user journey. So in that case, we have the users, making their investment choices. We show them a pop-up screen built with the feedback tool, which was kind of a conversation offering to reassess their investor profile. And as they clicked on it, we would direct them to a type form, which was kind of reproducing our advice questionnaire. This type form was then connected to Google Sheets, which was running the recommendation calculation. So none of this happened through our backend or code, nothing. It's just automation on the marketing side, and on the product side, with Zapier and other tools. And once the Google Sheet had run the recommendation calculation, it was sending an automatic email to users containing their personalized recommendation. After 2 weeks, we got 400 people clicking on that screen, 60% conversion rates. So it was kind of massive validation of the needs or the value that users would see and the hypothesis that we had originally. In addition to this, I think a great way that we use it as well when we run such experiments is to call back some of the users who answered your survey or went through your MVP. That way you can get even deeper insights, and with very targeted users, like for example, users who answered no to your survey, you can just target them for follow-up calls. And in general, because they already answered to your survey, they would be more willing to answer your questions. All right, moving on to the next step, solution exploration. So at this moment, we find that this part is it's very time-consuming on the product and design side, because we generally tend to organize 1, often 2, sometimes 3 testing sessions and prototypes. And it takes a lot of time to do this. You need to provide a lot of users to the team. And we find that recruiting users doesn't have a lot of value, and it takes time. And it's even frustrating sometimes, because it's like you have a prototype ready, but you have to wait for 10 days till you have your user test planned in your calendar. So what we do now is, more and more often, we push user properties to Scream, the feedback tool, and then we use these properties as selection criteria to recruit users in the application using targeted criteria, as I said. So in that particular case, for example, on the mobile application, we had 5 user test sessions booked in the next 48 hours, and it only took us 10 minutes to configure the survey to have that. It's connected to a Calendly. OK, right. Last use case I'm going to talk about. As you launch your feature, you want to measure how it went, and you want to learn from that. So we had this thing with, we recently introduced 2 changes in our onboarding funnel, which basically consisted in reviewing the user experience in identity verification. And we also introduced a new document that user had to sign electronically. So these are kind of annoying changes in the experience. And we wanted to make sure that users would not perceive, it wouldn't have a large impact on user perception of onboarding. So we could have done that through shadowing users, but again, very time-consuming. So what we did instead is we, on top of standard metrics, which we measure, for example, conversion rate at onboarding, we introduced a new survey, which was more or less a CSAT, before and after the changes, to ask, and we asked users, how did you find your onboarding? And so if there was a significant change before and after the changes. And we also have these follow-up questions for people who gave us a bad score to understand whether the changes that we made were quoted as a source of pain. Again, super fast. In days, you get tons of results. And you know quantitatively that, in our case, this didn't have any impact on user perception. The changes were not quoted by users. So that's fine. And so what it means is that we saved a lot of time in the decision that we had to make whether we should iterate more on these changes. So in our case, we knew that for the next couple of months, it wasn't necessary. Right, I think so the presentation is coming to an end. I tried to show you a couple of use cases that might give some of you a couple of ideas on how to maybe use your feedback tool differently, if you have one, to learn faster. And I think one tip I wanted to leave you with is that we learned over time that feedback collection should be actively managed. So we couldn't just, in our case, we couldn't just drop our NPS CSAT survey and just sit there, wait for feedback to come in and learn. No, we needed to create new occasions to talk to users all the time by creating new surveys, modifying surveys, monitoring the number of surveys per users. And so it's kind of a job to do that, but it's super easy if you have the right tool and a flexible tool to do that. Right, I'm done. I hope you learned.